It's time for the after show. I'm Will Aubrey, and John Darnell is here with me as we do the politics edition of the Improbability Engine for this week, and things just get stranger all the time.
Yeah, I believe we've officially gone down the rabbit hole. Things have gotten ridiculous. It's ridiculous. There's no other word for it than ridiculous. New York Times broke a story that said that a number of Trump campaign officials who have had some tight runnings with Donald Trump have been in contact with Russian government agents throughout the campaign and since. We've had the National Security Advisor resign over his contact with Russian officials and whether he told the truth or lied about that. What makes it even worse is he's a retired U.S. general.
And let's be clear why it matters and what he did. The contact came before the Trump administration took office.
Yeah.
It is illegal for people who are not
the government.
Yes, not part of the government, not empowered by the executive, to engage in diplomacy of any kind with another country.
Yeah.
So if you're the incoming president and you're on his staff, it's against the law for you to go negotiate with the Russians until you take office.
Absolutely, and the actual law is called the Logan Act. That keeps people from doing that. What it does is it stops there being illicit dealings. And one of the ones that comes to mind was during the election of 1968, future Secretary of State, and I can't think of his name now, under Nixon.
Kissinger.
Kissinger, before the election, had been speaking with the North Vietnamese about delaying peace talks until after the election. Do I think that cost the Democrats the 68 election? I don't know, but I'm here to tell you it was a very close election in 68, and the war was a major talking point on the Democratic side. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But later on, it was under the Nixon White House that they did sign the peace treaty with the North Vietnamese, ending the Vietnam War.
When was the Logan Act passed?
The Logan Act, let's see if I can find that. That's a very good question. I don't know. Let me see if I can find where we get that information. It's a good law. I mean,
absolutely. Absolutely.
It keeps people from trying to act as the government and not be the government, which is dangerous. Well, it's one that's been on the books for a while. 1799 was when it was enacted. So this is one that, when we talk about the founding fathers,
are you surprised that Flynn resigned?
No, and here's why. He didn't resign because of his contact with Russian agents. Let's make that abundantly clear. The Republicans in the White House, the Republicans in the Senate, the Republicans in the House, they don't care about contact with the Russians because they have the ability to investigate those contacts and all the sources of information that say that there were contacts. If they cared about that, they would be doing something about it.
Okay.
But they don't care about that. They don't care about that kind of illicit contact. The reason why Flynn resigned was because he got caught lying to the Trump administration people. Sure, that's what it is. Trump doesn't care if you lie to news, don't care if you lie to the people, don't care if you lie about anything else, but don't lie to him. And that's the double standard that we're dealing with. That's why Flynn resigned, was because he had lied to the president. The president decided he didn't want him in the White House anymore. I mean, that's really it. There is no logical reason other than that why he would resign in that situation, and the resignation would be accepted.
Okay. Well, it will be interesting to see where things go from here, because it's relatively clear that other members of the Trump administration did the exact same thing that Flynn did, and perhaps Trump himself did the exact same thing. All illegal. Now, we've seen things like this happen in the past, on occasion, and it hasn't.
Common, but
and it has not brought any administration down, and I don't expect it to bring the Trump administration down. It's just one more thing.
Well, and the big point that it raises is you've got the pro-Russian Republicans who idolize Putin, who has cracked down on homosexuality in his own country, as well as cracking down on freedom of the press. He recently decriminalized beating of women.
I couldn't believe that.
Yeah, why? What possible reason would that be okay?
Why would you decriminalize domestic violence?
It just doesn't make any sense. So there are some Republicans who are pro-Putin. They like what Putin does, how he leads, how he does things. I personally don't, but that's fine. But no, that's not to say that all Republicans are like that. There's another branch of the Republican Party, namely led by McCain and Lindsey Graham, who are anti-Russia. Now, that doesn't mean that that McCain and Lindsey Graham are progressives by any measure of the word, but it does mean that there is a factioning of the Republican Party that is going on right now. And if it were to progress, which it looks like it could be as big as the factioning of the Democratic Party in the early 60s due to the Civil Rights Movement. There is a real shot here to see a split emerge in the Republican Party. Now, how that will affect elections, it's too early to tell. There's no way of knowing. You're seeing a lot of division in the country, and it's not just division along party lines. There are major cracks forming amongst a lot of different groups who, up until now, had either been non-vocal or too small to cause any kind of a ripple. I think you're starting to see it now. There have been protests at Republican town hall meetings. Chavez in Utah, who's the head of the House Oversight Committee, was shouted down at a meeting in Utah. Now, Utah's not the most Democratic or blue state in the world. They're pretty consistently conservative about a lot of things, and his constituency had some very tough questions that he dodged and didn't want to answer. And he's not the only one. There have been multiple Republicans who've had that problem. Democrats are having the same issue. There are questions about the Affordable Care Act. There are questions about, what are we doing? How are we going to, to change the narrative of the country to something positive again? And frankly, nobody really has any answers.
They don't. And on the Affordable Care Act, they're not going to repeal it. They've made a lot of noise about it, and every day you see another story about how they're talking about the fact that they won't repeal it. They're going to tweak it in a couple of ways, and we'll see what tweaks they apply, but they're not going to repeal it.
It makes me wonder what Republicans who voted for this administration and for this Congress are going to do when the whole House comes up for a vote in 2018. Every single Republican has run on repeal and replace Obamacare. It is as they kiss a baby, they talk about repeal and replace. That's the entire Republican mantra, and they've got people suckered into thinking they're actually going to do that, and they're not.
No, of course they won't.
Because let's call it what it is. It's a Republican plan that gives lots of money
to corporations.
It's the greatest plan the Republicans ever came up with, according to Republicans. If they could just get away from having to give pesky health care to people, they would endorse that very quickly. Because then you just eliminate the middleman. No, we'll just hand you money. It'll be all right.
And as far as the cost to the government of the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare,
Yeah.
the money goes to corporations. It's not like, let's be clear here, it's not like when these people are getting a subsidy to help them buy health insurance that they're getting a check from the government.
Right.
The money's going to a corporation.
Right.
It's going to an insurance company.
Yeah.
And the Republicans like that. That's what they're all about, is siphoning
Absolutely.
money off.
Yeah, if you called those tax cuts or something of that nature, Republicans would love it.
Now, let's move on to state politics, because
Okay.
there's a new crime bill that has just
Mm-hmm.
come out.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't know what all is in this.
Okay.
There are some things in it that are getting absolutely no coverage whatsoever.
All right.
Okay? It raises the level at which a theft becomes a felony from $500 to $2,000.
So theft by unlawful taking, which is currently under $500, which is a misdemeanor, versus theft by unlawful taking over $500, which is a felony.
They're raising it to $2,000. This is according to a friend of mine who
Probably knows his stuff.
definitely knows his stuff, because he's a judge. So,
Gotcha.
okay?
You mean like American Idol, or?
No.
Okay.
Now,
I'm just checking.
felonious failure to pay child support is going from 1,000, the level at which it becomes a felony, 1,000 to 5,000. Okay? Then they're going to be required to release people on their own recognizance for almost all offenses. There is a list of something like 25 violent offenses that will require bail. Other than that,
Everybody else is ROR.
everybody else is ROR. So, if it's a non-violent offense, it's, ROR. Let me give you an example where that's insane.
Okay.
Say there's an emergency protective order issued and you're not allowed to be around your ex-wife.
Mm-hmm.
You show up at her place of work. They go arrest you, but it's not a violent offense, so ROR. You can go back to her place of work. And they'll arrest you again, but who cares?
Now, is this opening up for more judicial discretion, or is it
No.
bumping all those
You have
down?
to release them ROR. You don't get the option. You have to release them ROR. And they're going to bankrupt county jails, because as it is now, the state pays county jails to house state prisoners.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because
They don't want to build new prisons.
they don't want to build new prisons.
That costs money.
They're going to stop doing that and instead send these prisoners to private prisons.
Of course, which costs more. They just do. They just
But
cost more.
get this. Private prisons are really day camps, because the prisoners get to go home at night. And if they have a job, they could get work release.
Well,
So-
you know what?
so-
That just goes to show you, whenever you hear a Republican talk about tough on crime, that's a joke. Here's my thought.
It is the most liberal crime bill that anybody has ever
Small L
seen
liberal.
or heard of, and yet it's being proposed by the law and order conservative movement
Here's the
and,
thing
and
to
the
remember.
Republican Party.
This is something the Republican Party has worked so hard to take power out of a judge's hands. And you can look at it from a local level and use this as a great example, but also at state and federal levels with the introduction of mandatory minimum sentencing. The idea that mandatory minimum sentencing works is ridiculous, because what it does is it imposes a sentence on somebody for a crime for which the judge can do nothing but rubber stamp it. So there's no chance for a judge to look at extenuating circumstances. There's no chance for a judge to have a grasp and be a professional judicial member. Because this is what we're talking about. Judges in America are professionals. They are professionals in their field. Now, Are all judges like that? No, because in their wisdom, the American people have created a system where they vote for judges in some instances, and not always do we vote for professionals. But the good news is that there's a check on that we can say, you know what, this guy's not good, he's not professional, we can take him out and put a new one in. But the issue at hand here is that you are selecting jurists, these professional judges, you're selecting them to do a very difficult job that falls under a very narrow bandwidth of expertise. Not anybody can be a judge. It takes a lot to be a good judge. And so then you come in and you take legislators who are part-time workers who don't know what they're doing, and they just pass legislation that limits what a judge can do. Now, I personally look at it a little differently. I think that in most cases, judges are fair, they're professional, they're educated, and they know what's going on in any situation. Now, that's not always the case, and there are always issues with those, but I think we have checks and balances on that. I would like for a judge to be able to look at somebody who has 3 possessions of methamphetamine and not have to send them for life or have a mandatory minimum sentence that they have to go and do. I would much rather a judge be able to look at somebody and say, look, I've got 2 options here. I can send you to jail for life, and it's well within my ability to do so, and it will be for life. Or we can try and work out a treatment system that will allow you to not be an addict or to get into recovery from your addiction and possibly enter society. What you've done now is you've said, okay, the only way to do this is through jail. The problem with that is that when you send people to jail, they just become better criminals.
Yeah.
The recidivism rate is astronomical for everybody because once you're a felon, you can't get a job. It's hard to get work. And if you try to come back out, you have no social skills, you have no other skills, it's impossible.
Of course, the new crime bill basically does the opposite of mandatory minimums.
Right, which says you're giving the judge no ability anyway.
It's still, you're not giving him discretion. It's all these people are. And it doesn't even begin to make any sense. And, I don't know. It's mind-boggling.
Why even have judges?
Yeah.
I mean, really, if you're gonna legislate what all the sentences are, why have a judge at all? Just kind of let it play out, and then they'll file their appeals, and it'll cost you a lot of money, and then you'll have judges at the appellate level, and they can decide, well, it was a fair trial, or no, it's not a fair trial.
Now, the Republican-controlled House in Frankfurt is negotiating with the governor so that they can make Kentucky IDs compliant with the federal standards.
They've already done this once.
So that you can use them to get on an airplane, take a flight somewhere.
What's called real ID standards from the federal government,
The last time they passed this bill, the Republican governor vetoed it.
Yeah.
They're hoping that they can get the bill passed again and get it through by June, and that Kentucky IDs will become compliant.
Yeah.
Now, the head of the House is insisting that the governor give a commitment that he won't veto it.
Because I know the punchline. I know the punchline to this. This is why I'm laughing.
Give me the punchline then.
He will not guarantee that he won't veto it.
Right. He won't give them the guarantee they want. He says he's not going to veto it, but he won't give them the guarantee they want the way they want it. Right. And so now, who knows what's going to happen? And why he vetoed it in the first place, he can't really explain.
You know what? This is pandering at the highest level. There are libertarian-leaning think tanks who hate Real ID. They hate it. They despise it. They didn't like it when it was passed, but quite frankly, it is what it is. They're saying, well, this is akin to a national ID card, which it's not. It's not. It's overseen by state agencies. It's done at local levels. It's not a national ID card.
The hilariously hypocritical thing about these people is that they are behind the papers law.
Yeah.
In Arizona that required people to carry papers proving that they were a citizen.
Well, I'm here to tell you that if you tried to follow all the mental gymnastics that it takes to be a conservative in this country nowadays, it's exhausting, and quite frankly, it's not worth all the time. It really is. It's the most asinine stuff that I've ever seen in my entire life. You know, you can be pro-national defense and anti, Patriot Act.
I got one more thing for you.
Yeah, go for it.
In the state of Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
there's a bill in the state legislature.
Mm-hmm.
And this made me so mad. Pardon my language. I wanted to go kick somebody's ass when I read about this. Bill in the Tennessee state legislature that would classify all children born as a result of artificial insemination as illegitimate.
These are pro-life legislators, by the way.
People who are so judgmental and hate-filled, it's just mind-boggling.
Well, and what this is quite frankly a shot across the bow to the LGBTQ community. These are people who want to be able to have a child and to put their partner's name on the birth certificate. Now, that's not crazy. That's not even...
But
okay.
it's not just LGBTQ people that have artificial insemination.
There are a huge there's a giant pot of people that do this.
Yeah, it's just that these people that are wanting to do this are hate-filled and judgmental and anti-science.
Yeah, and this is the problem that we've got. We unto itself, is this the end of the world? No. When taken with the cacophony of idiocy that is coming out of the right wing this decade, my lifetime even, you if you're not upset, you're not paying attention.
And by the way,
Yeah.
the pronunciation of cacophony annoys me.
Why?
You pronounce it correctly,
Uh-huh.
but I don't like that pronunciation because in my head it sounds differently. And so, it really annoys me.
How does it sound in your head, Will?
Cacophony. I mean, I know that's wrong. Okay, I realize it's wrong, but it shouldn't be wrong. So,
well, we could go through and start listing some words that everybody...
Maybe we should just rewrite the dictionary.
All right, well, I've got Z's. You can have all the rest of the letters. That's too much work. That's too much work for me. I'm not okay with that. No, this is a scary time, man. It's a scary time for politics, and it's one of those where all it takes for bad people to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Yeah. And that's where we're at right now, is what do we do next? So I encourage people to find somebody, get active. If you hear about something that seems just too crazy to be true, research it, find out if it is true, find some credible sources, and if it is true, call your legislator. Call them up. Don't send them an email, call them. Go 1975 on them and call them during business hours. Let them know that you're upset with it, because that's the only way they're ever going to know. They're insulated and isolated people, generally speaking, that only hear what people want them to hear, and that's not the case. You need to let them know if that makes you mad, and you've got to be willing to stand up and vote for somebody else.
You got anything else?
No, still counting down the days till 2018, so hopefully we'll find some clarity before then, as long as the Russians haven't taken over.
That brings to a close this edition of the Improbability Engine.
Destroyed. There's no point getting all annoyed. Lie back and let the planet dissolve around. Despite those next to defeats, we